when I arrived at medical school, I just noticed that we are different people from different walks of life and different ages and different backgrounds. And the only thing that we had in common is that we had the ability to flog ourselves with fear and terror of failing. But as we age, what happens is that we are going to wear ourselves out. We're going to just drain our energy and become more and more procrastinating on things that we want to do. Welcome to Unstoppable Brain. I'm Dr. Kyra, and we're here to translate neuroscience into behavior change and the life you want. In our last episode of this season, we're going to do a Q&A with our listeners, and I'm going to have a special guest, our director of the pod, Isabella Allen. Welcome, Isabella.
Hello, Dr. Kyra. It is wonderful to be on the other side.
Yeah, so you have gathered questions from listeners, and these are the top ones that I think you've put together, and I'm just going to turn it over to you, and then I will be the answer of the Q and answer.
Okay, so we're just going to go straight into it. And we've got a question here from Jennifer from Illinois. Hi, Dr. Kyra. I have read all the books and I know exactly what my morning routine should look like to lower my stress. But the second my alarm goes off, I just hit snooze and scroll. Why is there such a massive gap between what I logically know I should do and what my body actually does?
Yeah, so Jennifer, this is the most common human experience that we all are having. So first off, you're not alone and you're not bad for having this experience. You are in what's called a no-do gap in psychology, and there's also say-do gaps too, which is another kind of form of this gap between what we're trying to do and what we wish we would do and what we actually do. And that actually was the aha moment in my role as a doctor, as a research scientist, where I came across somebody who said that some version of what you just asked about. I know what to do. I know how much food and what kind of food, and I know how much exercise and all that stuff, but I just can't do it. So the trick of life, the entire ball game is all about closing that gap between what you know you want to do or what you wish you would do and what you actually do. And your biggest foe in that gap that you have to challenge and overcome is your habenula. So this is an area that those who have listened to the pod have heard those smatterings about all season, but those who have followed my work know a lot about, and then the rest of the world knows nothing about. So I'm just going to take a moment to kind of unpack what that is. So Habenula 101, this is painless science, folks. There is a part of our brain, it's about the size of a pea. There's two peas in the center, very center of our brain, and it's called the habenula. I will reduce it to habenula, but it's really like the habenula complex, the anti-reward pathway. There's a lot of different names for it. If you're wanting to do that research, please do. And what it does principally is it is the brakes on our behavior. It stops us from doing something. And so when you are in the morning meaning to go work out, but then you hit the snooze and then you scroll, you are stopping yourself from your intentions to go work out. And the sort of fascinating question to me is why? Why is that happening? What triggered your habenula to stop you? So because if the habenula is on, then it stops you. You lose motivation to keep trying that thing. So the question is that we're going to be really good with is how did my habenula get turned on? How did it get triggered? What happened there? And what I've been doing, if this is helpful to you all, is sort of asking myself that question when I see myself not doing what I want to do, when I see myself giving up and quitting and stopping and being stuck, I'm like, what turned on my habenula? Now, the things that turn it on are interesting, right? So those are the whole smattering of what we'll call negative emotions, cognitive distortions if you're a psychologist. And what these do is it creates a protective response from the habenula that the habenula's job is like looking around the corner, like, is that going to hurt me? Is that going to kill me? Is that going to cause me shame and embarrassment? Is that going to cause me to fail? and all those things. So if there's any hint of that, any belief, any expectation, any external person telling me that I'm a loser, or maybe as a kid I got indoctrinated in a certain negative way, then the habenula is going to be a protector. It's going to be, I'm going to stop you from doing this because why try? Because you're going to just fail and it's going to be worse off. You're going to be worse off. So, in a nutshell, when you want to get out of the doom scrolling kind of mode in the morning, the thing I would suggest is just replacing the clock just to get some distance, some friction between you and that phone of yours, because that is an addictive behavior. And we can go over that in another conversation, of course, of what the connection between habenula and addiction is. But you want to, at least right now, with with your sober mind before you go to bed, put your phone way across the room and get like just a simple little cheap clock that can be an alarm clock for you. Still will hit the snooze maybe, but it will at least give you a little bit of friction before you indulge in the doom scrolling and get completely stuck. And the thinking in science is that if you give your sort of slow brain a moment, your conscious mind a moment to remember what you meant to do and what's going to feel ultimately the best for you, then you will make the desirable thing easier to do. So, good luck, Jennifer.
I loved that answer, and that is so, so relatable, Jennifer. We have got Marcus from Georgia. I can only seem to get things done when I am pushed right up against a terrifying deadline. The adrenaline kicks in, and I do it. How do I stop relying on stress and panic for getting things done?
Yeah, so you're talking about my whole medical school class. Like, when I arrived at medical school, I just noticed that we are different people from different walks of life and different ages and different backgrounds, and the only thing that we had in common is that we had the ability to flog ourselves with fear and terror of failing. And but, as a 24-year-old, that might be doable, you know? But as we age, what happens is that if we keep just flogging ourselves with our, fears, with our terror, our anxieties, those kinds of things, we are going to wear ourselves out. We're going to just drain our energy and become more and more procrastinating on things that we want to do. And the procrastination is really just this kind of um, stuck, numb, kind of whirling around, spinning kind of state. And we use the fear of failure or the fear of consequence as a way to kind of shock ourselves out of that. So, a kinder, more self compassionate way would be to do like, you heard of parts therapy, Isabella? You know what that is?
Yeah, I do. Yeah. I'm a
That's a
Californian.
good yeah, that's a good mental model for really having an appreciation for, like, there's the doer and there's a planner in us, and this is an idea from Richard Thaler, Nobel laureate in behavioral science, and his idea is that there's a part of us that sets us up to do something, promises to do something or has a deadline, and then there's a part of us that has to fulfill that has to do that actually on time or in a good way or that kind of thing. And there's a conversation between those 2 parts of ourselves that we are constantly in. Now, if the planner is also a, draconian punisher, archetypally, then the doer is gonna become this, kind of beaten down being, this beaten down dog, and we want to instead encourage the doer with positive affirmations, with hope, with, little rewards. For some people, it's like, I'll do this much and then I can take a break, or this much and then I can be on my phone. Whatever the reward is for the doer, we have to design the doer's behavior. And so, to us, it's all about wrangling that doer with love and compassion and good things so that the doer is more willing to do what the planner wants in the future. It literally is a marriage between these 2 archetypes that we're all dealing with. And I myself am a very notorious procrastinator. And sometimes the drama of the deadline is an adrenaline hit, and so I have to kinda look at that and be like, "Do I really want that much drama in my life?" And I'll be honest with you all, I have not overcome this challenge, so I am with you, Marcus.
I love that answer, and I am now gonna start imagining how I can be kinder to my planner in the future and when it comes to spring cleaning and how can I reward myself.
To your doer.
Okay, for my doer, sorry,
Yeah, that's
my
okay.
doer. So we have got Alma from Texas. You've called the habenula our biggest obstacle when changing behavior. Is there anything positive about the habenula? Good question.
Yeah, this is maybe like an artifact of how much I have to, like, really emphasize to the masses that we have a Benula and how consequential it is, how powerful it is. And then the second thing that happens is that people start asking about, like, well, that seems like a really mean part of our brain. And really, it is the lifesaver in our brain. And a more recent scientific study that came out on rat behavior and rat habenula illustrates this. So, one group of rats, what they did was they were normal rats and they set them up to do a task. Let's say task A, and the rat was set up to fail by the scientists. It was planned into this experiment. So the rat fails, and then what you see in normal rats is they start to do plan B, plan C, plan D. They start to strategize on what are all the different ways I can solve this problem? And we call that in my work, iterative mindset, being able to iterate instead of fail, right? The second group of rats, what they did is they blocked out their habenula, so their habenula did not work. And what they saw is that the task A that they put in front of them, the rat would do plan A and then fail, and then do plan A again, then fail, then do plan A again. So they never got off plan A. They kept trying the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. And we all know what that is.
Insanity.
Yeah, and so that's the thing that we all kinda wanna avoid is wasting our energy, wasting our time, wasting our hope even, and instead being able to iterate. And, quite literally, people in the UK met young men who had died, unfortunately, of overdose. Their habenula was shrunken, and the idea there is that their brakes were out. If the habenula is the brake on our behavior and your brakes go out, then there's nothing stopping you from overdosing. There's nothing stopping you from accidentally killing, like losing your life, I should say. And so it is our best friend and our biggest foe simultaneously, if that makes sense. And I think we all need to just appreciate, how powerful it is over our behavior so that we can work with it.
Okay, so we have got Mick from North Carolina, and actually he's got a pretty topical question for us. So I've seen articles that GLP-1s affect addiction. I take a GLP-1 for my diabetes and notice I drink less. What's going on?
This is bleeding edge. Basically, there are only two hormones that currently are in the literature that I've seen that can deactivate or turn off the habenula. So when you turn off the habenula, then your motivation can resume to do good things. And what the thinking here is that the habenula is also this becoming more and more the central player in driving cravings of addiction, as well as driving withdrawal symptoms, the pain, the hurt of when you're jonesing, when you're itching for could be your phone, could be alcohol, could be anything. And so the idea here is that the GLP-1, which is normally in our body, is able to suppress and regulate the habenula from going crazy and talking negatively to ourselves and seeking some sort of, addiction to numb it out, to quiet the noise of the madness of our negative self-talk. And the because we have a society that is, shall we say, low GLP-1, because GLP-1 is a daughter molecule of the mother molecule oxytocin. Oxytocin is a major, influence, it's a hormone, a major influence on how we feel and how we behave. And oxytocin comes from, is released by a sense of belonging, a sense of connection with each other. So as our society takes us away from actually looking at the one live brain tissue that we have, our eyeballs, at another person's eyeballs, we're looking on this screen right now. Our oxytocin wanes, it declines, and that naturally means that GLP-1s are tanking. Natural GLP-1s are tanking. For those of us who have bouts of loneliness or are isolated or have, computer jobs or any of those kinds of things where we're taken away from our families and our natural social circles and our natural community, or maybe we don't have a community. So all of that calculates to low GLP-1 in our bodies relative to what should be natural for us as humans. And when you take a GLP-1 to say GLP-1 replacement therapy is what that really is, then it's going to quiet the habenula and you're going to be less craving of any sort of addiction. You're going to be less pained by withdrawal from your addictive substance or addictive behavior, whatever that is. And this is not known. Only you who are listening to this right now know this because really everybody else believes that it's the slowing of the gut, but that's more the peripheral nervous system. What we're talking about with addiction and the effects of GLP-1 dampening or even removing addictive cravings is happening in the brain. And if it's happening in the brain, it's happening in the addiction driver, which is the habenula.
I think people are going to be so surprised to hear that we actually make GLP-1s ourselves. I think that's
Mm.
going to be a little bit of a shakeup for sure.
Yeah, I mean, some people know it, some people don't, but nobody knows except for the people who are listening to us right now, and maybe a couple scientists. Maybe I could count on one hand how many scientists know this too. That GLP-1 is interacting with the habenula and shutting down the addiction through that mechanism.
It makes sense from all the reports you're hearing of people drinking less and stopping smoking and all these great side effects.
Mhm.
Okay, I've got Naomi from Idaho. How is the vagus nerve related to your work on the habenula?
Yeah, so there's been no direct, studies so far around habenula and vagus nerve that I'm aware of. And the relationship that I think they have is chemical. And what I mean by that is there is a neurotransmitter called acetylcholine, ACH, and this is the parasympathetic signaler, meaning when we are in rest digest mode or when we're sleeping or when we're relaxed, acetylcholine, ACH, is the dominant molecule that our brain is operating on, right? Whereas when we have the sympathetic fight or flight, like, panic, stress, those kinds of things, you're talking about cortisol or norepinephrine or, the natural amphetamines, epinephrines that we have, that we release. And so the vagus nerve is controlled by primarily acetylcholine. It has both. It has both the on and off switch, right? But if vagus activity is robust and high and you can easily digest your food and your nervous system is really regulated, then acetylcholine is doing the job on your vagus nerve. Simultaneously, acetylcholine is responsible for calming down the habenula. And so it's something that we don't want to activate the habenula. We don't want to use stimulating neurotransmitters like, you know, um, glutamate is something that activates the habenula, but you don't want to activate your habenula. You want to keep it nice and quiet and sleepy. So acetylcholine is one of these things. And the other thing that has been really interesting recently is there was a study that showed that acetylcholine, there's two different studies. One is that showed that acetylcholine is an essential neurochemical for you to change your habits, to break bad habits, and to have the capacity to build new neuroplastic habits, right? Through repetition. The other study showed that the habenula was essential in breaking, like we were talking about with the rats, plan A to plan B. And so there, I'd be curious whether anybody's going to put the chocolate and peanut butter together and figure out that it's acetylcholine working on the habenula that creates this almost gating switch between doing the wrong thing for myself and doing something good for myself or being able to switch gears like that. So stay tuned on that, but I think that's my current hypothesis is that those two things are probably twined together.
Okay, so next question up, we have Sarah on LinkedIn. I'm curious whether these brain behaviors are learned or genetic. For example, are some people born with a lack of a failure detector and higher motivation, or is it a learned trait?
Mm. All right, that's a really good one to parse out. So first of all, epigenetics are real, meaning that if you look at animals who descend from animals who had traumatic events, they themselves are more neurotic, more anxious, as offspring. You see this with, unfortunately, people who breed pit bulls for fighting. You see those, down generations become more and more anxious, more and more fear aggressive, and they're bred for that. And so we know that that can carry down in families. We've also seen in humans very robust evidence of, if you have a depression in your family or some of these mental illnesses in your family, that there's a pretty good penetrance to the next generation and even the third generation. How this relates to the habenula is that I can inherit a habenula that might, through historical trauma, that might already be a little sensitive, meaning that any little thing, any little negativity bias that or negative emotion that comes in my way will trigger my habenula, and it will do so more sensitively than somebody who doesn't have a family history of trauma. And that's because as the habenula is the protector of us, tries to keep us alive, the habenula was encoded by my parents or their parents or even above them to stay alive by being afraid of or being reactive to a threat of some kind because our family was under threat a lot, that kind of thing. And so there is both the genetic nature of did I inherit a more sensitive habenula where I'm going to think more things are threats than somebody who has a more secure attachment history in their family and a more secure self-esteem history in their family. And then there's also within my life the nurture part of the equation of, even though I come from genetics that have been targeted, if I myself have a peaceful life, then I'll recover some stability of my habenula. Whereas if I myself have additional trauma, additional prejudice that I run up against, additional, food insecurity, whatever the case may be. Excuse me. Start that over. Whereas if I in this life have additional trauma, have additional food insecurity, have additional prejudice that I experience, I will continue to have a hypersensitive habenula, and I might even add to the sensitivity for my own offspring as well, my own children as well.
Wow, I feel like we're going to get merch for the podcast that say something like protect your habenula. Like at this rate, it's a great question, Sarah, and so, so fascinating. Thank you. Well, Dr. Kyra, this takes us to our last question of today. And I mean, it has been a great season one. And Amelia from California wants to know, you interviewed a wide range of guests. Did you learn anything surprising this season on the show?
I think my biggest takeaway is how much I learned from the guests. Each one of them were so fascinating and things that I didn't think about. And it's really good to not, because I tend to go so deep on the neuroscience that I really specialize in that I need to look around more, and so the pod is really forcing me to understand and integrate the wisdom of others into my own understanding of how our brains work, and I think that just improves my ability, but I think that as a group, the every guest built on every other guest and showed different aspects of life and modern life that we need to think about and how that does or doesn't work with our brains and how that does or doesn't work with our social brain as well. So I think all of that together just it was really a powerful first season and I'm looking forward to the next one.
That is so awesome. And we really are building an unstoppable brain right here. It's fascinating. And I just can't wait for season two.
Yeah, well, kudos to you for making this work. And, for those of you who don't know, Isabella's just been sweating all the details in the background and any quality we have, any quality guests we have, she's just been spearheading all of that. So give yourself a huge round of applause for a really successful season. So on that note, I want everybody to like and subscribe so that the algorithm will match us when we're ready for the next set of episodes. And so, yeah, please like and subscribe to keep in touch, and we'll see you then.